fellow Americans and people of the human species body of individual bodies, science that has been abridged, sickly distinctly at the states, but also sickly non distinctly, a breaching method is manifest. In effect, treating nature quality aspects in nature of people that it hides behind and through. Black pupils. We have left out, we have had left, we have been forced to leave out how we have black pupils and whites of eyes. The same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time, projected to us, not just by, but as that identity that we can't be, the other species can't be, but are anyway. In other words, we can discern only an extent of it, of the identity that is all space slash existence at the same time. We are, but to that extent, we can discern, which is only you know not much, but it comes with its complete identity of relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that simultaneously. But see, we have, like, for example, there's a Michael Cohen and there's a Meidastouch network. It's every network though. You guys have World Trade Fake. Say CBS has. Please help CBS. Just please respond to me here because you can't be in the background. You guys are just going to be leaking more and more because I'm going to explain it more and more because they won't get onto paper. CBS has interbranch sources that forge and switch names, that collusions at all natures of crime scenes originally instilled up. Even the branches of government, the difference of that and the intelligence tied to them, which has been shared with foreign countries before America's founders were born. Shared tactical ulterior from how nature holds us simultaneously independent species body of individual unified species body of individual independent bodies simultaneously unified, therefore, with all group differences in demonstration slash S of what's generating this. See, we have things that are true always, pretended theory. We have things that our founders communicated, like the subject. A breaching method was a subject in the communications of America's founders that had to be declassified after their deaths because there was a breaching method entrenched. A breaching method is a subject in the communications of our founders. They also have self-valued roles with what they said, used by the breaching method, but through ourselves. Again, as the species volume science. And it communicates with the difference between short words and long words. In other words, so we have this our short words forbid all kind of rights that are too numerous to list, let alone to be a Native Americans first. Because if you can't understand that, then you can't understand the breaching method that was in place. And if it stays about that in the breaching method, then you can't understand the breaching method that was in place. It came from so many ancient times that already had everyone fighting with themselves. Not just as that known and discerned, but as species volume science, species individual body of individual bodies, all group differences. And gentlemen, look at the other species bodies, they have two eyes. They have quality aspects in nature distinct from ourselves, but also non-distinct, and simultaneously with ourselves, but also for that further hyper simultaneous, not us nor them. Why and how? What is to an extent where we could discern, it comes with its complete identity itself, identity of relationship to itself, the identity of all space slash existence, and the only increasing value of that. In other words, nature shows us that we have the scientific obligations to discern as a scientific value, a further hyper additional distinct identity of simultaneous nature. We are distinct from other species bodies again. We are non-distinct from them. We are simultaneous with them. Again, for that is which is further hyper simultaneous, not just relative to how we have two eyes. In other species bodies, even fish have two eyes. Even Even bugs have consciousness and and ability to communicate with ourselves. To in other words, to a minuscule extent. Same thing with things that are not like black people's whites of eyes. It is also hyper evidential where and how this has been left out, where and how it was a subject imposed by a breaching method, also left out and replaced. See, the communications, the breaching method was a part of our founders' communications, which are distinct from what they said. In other words, they communicated there was a breaching method that did not allow them to have free speech. Had everyone's speech measured and maintained, collusions against ourselves of the human volume science, or that body was sensed. Collusions with ourselves too at the same time needed all with that cost blamed on other things, others ourselves, roles. All natures of positive treatments. Collusions could to keep its identity of relativity to ourselves, the breaching method, and the organization behind that breaching method, which was/is manifest at countries A through Z as a breaching method/S, with the plural parts only known to be able to hide behind and through without discernment, measures and maintains self-valued roles with suburbs since before America's founders were born. They were designed for the torture, extortion, and fact-cheating nature slavery of our founders, sickly distinctly from, therefore, the physical slavery of them too, not just the extortion of them. We're dishonesty about the extortion of George Washington is forced. All means and natures of knowledge are used dishonestly and tactically delusions wrought to get over on that. Each of the names of the sciences has use/s of their abridged syntax. And forgiveness is relative to this because there's any blame too. Nature shows us that is leaving out the breaching method. And then further, our founders' communication show this. But we have to be able to appreciate the difference between what is communicated and what is said. For example, little kids, especially in New York City, parts of it, especially in exceptions, especially parts of it in Hartford, Connecticut, described as a suburban/urban, which is more so a description since before our founders were born, in the minds of whoever wrote that on the Hartford, Connecticut website, has complete possession over the sciences, syntax, and convictions. Tactically, delusions wrought to black peoples. It is time. We have to deal with the actual delusions that are recorded and the actual criminally foreign influence, criminally foreign influence, factual qualities, aspects, and natures. And we're going to examine. I'm not even a lawyer. In other words, even Judge Napolitano, retired and standing judges, individually grouped and together. For example, with the groupings of the January 6th treatments, you don't speak about law like that. In other words, we don't speak about law leaving on black people's whites of eyes, how that was and is left out, and our founders' communication about the breaching method replaced. Pace. In other words, it is not by accident either. There are functions by this. There is a mass identity. There are mass identity, theft, fraud, slanders, styles, needs, and natures. Offensively shown they need to pretend. They don't realize. In other words, the nature of debate contains these quality aspects of nature. Nature as criminal insidious nature we can examine relative to how we have black people's whites of eyes. That's left out, and what our founders and what nature communicates about that. replaced. Like, to discern this, you have to discern that how nature is showing us. For example, a human fact cheaping nature breaching method is one of the things that is true, that always, that the value of those laws that were entrenched before America's founders were born. They were collusion slash, as was sickly distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies. Slavery against black, but it was against every single person. There were even Irish slaves reported. But one thing we have too, as hyper evidential, is everyone left out the value of discerning how what nature itself shows us. And our founders actually communicated all the database identities and identities of relativity to ourselves. Therefore, strict, hurt, persuaded, only allowed to be collusion slash S against ourselves. Relativity. Nature is constantly demonstrating us relativity slash hyper relativity as its three identities of relationship to itself that are only increasing its value to discern how they are bound. All gather around. Vaccines. I teach us things but long. So we're going to appreciate Romulus and Remus as a science. Romulus and Remus science is more probable and practical, where and how the Republic has been and its democratic functions have been taken and used as values in arrays of motivations, and with guilt differences used to measure or maintain. In other words, roles behind the breaching method, keeping other things, others, or selves blamed for things that it knew that nature would continually demonstrate to us. Like that and how human fact cheaping nature breaching method is one of the things that the laws were valued as before America's founders were born. And this being and having been valued with how we have black people's whites of eyes. And right next to Webb House, which they changed the name of to the Webb Stevens Museum. No, it's right next to a witch child's place. And others being and has been communicated, then our founders communicated. George Washington had to come there to counter extort right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. The reason he had to counter extort is because there was a torture slash extortion slash slavery method entrenched. Northern colonies, southern colonies. It had been perfected. Also, it was already across the globe. Everywhere there was a human species body. There are proofs it is more probable and practical to theorize, let alone to convict, that the things that were they convicted at the time and relative. One, like that mountain was taken down to take away the river, to denature the value nature system of the entire earth, and to make it a landscape feeders and all exceptions that to hide behind, but really coming with demonstrations of the same thing. But instead, nature's demonstrations and our founders employed effectively by this breaching method at countries A through Z. To it said, everyone sensing for the breaching method. Those laws were also valued to keep everyone sensing for the breaching method through other motivations, nature's needs, hyper additional, and so screening the breaching method and relative to where and to how the breaching method is a scientific value, apart with all kinds of answers, inseparable from all kinds of proper answers to all kinds of natural questions that are being and have been replaced. There are proofs it is more probable and practical to convict, to theorize, let alone to convict. That pantheism, where there's an ism part of it, it comes with a method of checking, a method of contemplation. That before prayer with faith, there's a method of checking what is true always. Like, for example, there is an extent of the past you know that is true always. And there's an extent of the past you know that you don't know about. And there's an extent to the past you don't know about it, you could figure out, though. Those 3 times of the past. There's an extent that you know is true always right now, active, grouped ways. There's an extent you know that you don't know about, but you could figure out. Or nature, you could use nature to teach you. It's just books. And there's an extent, like the seasons, though. See, but this is different. We're observing its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that. And we have to appreciate how its identity is equally to positive and negative to all parts of space/existence. But then with Earth having a special difference. But then with Earth having this one humanity, this species of humanity, being and having been systems tactically ulterior from its own, that when its own is also positive onto itself. So the rest of the species have no criminal foreign influences. So the rest of the species aren't forcing Leith of Hadith. Leith of Hadith comes relative to how nature itself shows us. With every subject comes its complete identity of relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that as 3 increasing values as its identity of relationship to all things, distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously / hyper-simultaneously, including the parts of those things, including as hyper-relativity, between and as the difference of the smallest finite detail or of the order of the finite. It shows us that we could only grapple with the finite, with things that are too strong for us. Like things that, in other words, and what is active one way. But by evaluating its method of showing us answers. We have the same colorized and different colorized at the same time. Because we have them distinctly from the other species' bodies. But also, again, non-distinctly, simultaneously / hyper-simultaneously. We have a hyper-projection being shown to us, having been shown to the ancients. Then the sciences became criminally foreign influence. Pantheism is to be led by it. Nature shows us that it is functional per how it is an identity that is hyper-invisible but still discernible. It is an identity of conjunction to all parts of English grammar and of other languages as the same identity of hyperconjunction. It is discernible where and how all parts of speech are about the invisible but still discernible. And why and how we need to appreciate, and how we could appreciate per itself. In other words, why there are more names than one, we need to appreciate for a verb, a predicate, the 2 participle natures. No also referential to time and forever nature, the present participle and the past participle, and the infinitive, where if you put a participle, a preposition, the word to, the preposition to, before a verb, it becomes an infinitive. So it's no longer a predicate, which is also a word name for a verb. And note how the predicate act is valued to law. The predicate is a relativity to the invisible, the rest of the identities of invisible but still discernible. And everything has conjunction to the hyper-invisible but still discernible. And this is what we do in all languages. We're appreciating the subjects we could tell. The subjects individually grouped and simultaneously to an extent. They come with our ability to use its system, but we have to use that system. We don't leave out the smallest finite detail. Like, for example, we have black people's whites of eyes and that was left out with the subject treatments of what slavery was about. When the breaching method itself employed that, that was the breaching method itself was a scientific value regarding what slavery was about. Its value is replaced. Other things, others, ourselves are blamed. Exactly the way our founders communicated for us to pay attention. So you guys have roles being used remotely, criminally foreign influence. CBS has people with Connecticut's Channel 3 News, has people involved with Gail King, involved with the World Trade Center attack, with a whole bunch of different countries, including people from Saudi Arabia, and communications with our country's campuses. The Trinity College, Central Connecticut State University, Quinnipiac University. Quinnipiac University has roles all kinds of natures of organized crimes with judges and prosecutors and their family members, planting evidences at and next to campuses, predicate acts, at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and names at and next to the state corrections offices, at and next to the state judicial branch offices, like Weathersfield Pizza House next to the state judicial branch offices. Central Connecticut State University is recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming. People from my grammar school and other schools I went that had ties to each other, with a Stephen Stocka and with a James Carone, and people with the name Lombardo, and their educators are involved with foreign and domestic intelligence families at campuses, including medical and fire campuses, putting fake transcripts in databases, fake ties, fake natures of ties to people, fake motivations, because they're also hiding one of the things with the motivations with everyone with all kinds of those crazy jobs and overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists from before America's founders were born. In other words, I lost my train of thought. But it's about the let's pay attention here, because in other words, there's a Midas touch. There are people who just speak about the most important things, and they're using other people's evidences, including court's evidences. WFSB has faked the outcome of an NLRB case and other legal cases with federal criminals in those cases, and their roles with child abusers, leaders of kids, and with abuses of their kids, and the difference of that also being and having been exploited. At the same time, with the kids of prosecutors and judges and other identities of positions with the courts involved, and planting evidences at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, names next to body dumping spots, and the news to offensively prevent anyone free speech, or the sense that free speech, where free speech is going to be used properly. No exceptions left out. Otherwise, they sense that body is sensed, including if that body is a majority of people, including if that body is everyone, every single body of a country, and that is adapted to relative to where and to how there has self-valued roles, with the hyper-possession at all locations, areas, and states, everywhere the species body is, and what it caused, blamed on other things, others, ourselves. Otherwise, someone noting it is sensed through our own people, and they say, "Oh, that's crazy," and they change or fake what they say. And while self-valuing that being and having been done at each campus we went to, and names next to them. I never think had anything to do with the Joe DeMoro. They made it. He was next to a kindergarten I went, increasingly at that John DeMoro, and they have a brother Paul DeMoro also now with wire crimes with them, methods with them, and the intelligence community, intercities, federal and intercities police departments, families. There's something to do with their roles with people with the name O'Brien, and all along Route 3. These are people not legitimately establishing undercover, and their roles with Russians and things like that. Russians and Americans have roles with psychiatry, all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes, acts and methods, and collusions, the difference of guilt hiding behind that. They are used remotely, using our country's names remotely at Russia and at America. The suits and ties, counters and exceptions They have roles of all kinds of natures, all kinds of scams, legal too. I am the tactical delusions that are also in place, where they have criminally foreign influence, factory nature, quality aspects of nature involved. So the Britain Superior Court has names forging and switching, and they have digital crimes on Facebook with a principal being involved with way worse than the upskirt natures they put him in jail for. And those jails and names on off the corrections officers had collusions with him. Way worse. I don't know. The difference of the guilt too is it being haven't been used remotely, because these are also names involved with the World Trade Center attack and used to screen and having been used to screen other motivations involved with the sources of the investigators of that investigations of it used remotely criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence black pupils. We have this evidence here replaced or pays. In other words, increasingly it's concentrated different natures of courts with the same house and one's tied to them with wire crime action methods in a whole bunch of different countries involved with those wire crime action methods. Also, like Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid, and now as an adult. They have some Mendez police brothers. One of them, his name is Eric Mendez. The other one switches his name. Involved with and motivations for it. Roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, falsified police reports, fake conversations with me, and their collusion next to Fox Connecticut News too, with digital offenders of kids, including medical and sexual at the same time, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, putting fake things with their educators too through time, but people from off campuses, so they keep things that are pretended debatable. And they keep it pretending it's personal when I'm using their names, criminally foreign influence ways. A whole bunch of people, Michael Emmett and other people tied to him are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, doing things with behavior narratives with the kids in the background, making them through themselves with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. And the differences of that with the kids of parents of kids. Now, there are kids of parents that work at the schools who are also involved with the judges' family members and prosecutors' family members involved with other agencies and scams with those differences, like where they make the difference of branches of government. They can't speak on anything properly till they get black people's rights of eyes correlated / hyper correlated the way nature shows us. In other words, so to speak. In other words, always Greek. In other words, before America's founders were born, before modern countries' leaders were born, there had already been a sustained, perfected human factory nature breaching method, all counters to itself, collusions with itself without even realizing it employed the short words more and more of the people of the sciences from off them to be collusion / S through hyper additional motivations, natures, needs, interests. And so to employ styles of logic, natures of logic as criminal insidiousness, nature / hyper criminal insidiousness nature. I am not a lawyer. Lawyers all sides of criminal and civil cases. Like, for example, there's a Trantolo, who's one of the ones involved with the Michael Cohen, who's involved with the Meidastouch network, involved with WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News. I believe it's a CBS affiliate. They have predicate acts there against me. And the difference of them or the intelligence next to them are names also with the same predicate acts methods of them next to Fox Connecticut News. A whole bunch of people next to Fox Connecticut News and next to WFSB have also collusions at corners of streets with WTNH, with their stories, planting predicate acts, collusion / acts with a whole bunch of different countries, and World Trade Center predicate acts. Has something to do with their roles with the corners of streets, like all along Route 175 too. Our names have that are collusions where they have people act and then they take a picture and make fake exceptions with that because they have collusions with used remotely, criminally foreign influence, uses of names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the court's names forging and switching names in sequences at the same time with the news, at the same time with intelligence, the difference of that, a whole bunch of different countries at the campuses, and even when they're not there, just the communications of it method, at and off them too. In other words, by pupils. When you search the premises treatments and when they're making passions, emotions, and blame, they're keeping other things, others ourselves, blame for our things we're supposed to blame on a breaching method. If you want to have them use passion emotions, then they have to lie about what they think passion is emotion. Oh, well, I'm not expert on logic. They've been putting fake things. A whole bunch of people have wire crime acts and methods with the police forging and switching names, with the same houses tied to them. And they also have roles with the I had on. In other words, with the World Trade Center attack, the same ones from Connecticut, intercities, intra-cities, inter-campuses, intra-campuses, and all sides of criminal and civil cases in the court's names and everything. Same, putting fake things and refusing writing. I've been asking for writing for a response before the World Trade Center attack. I didn't even know his name was involved yet. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. Him, his co-defendants, their family members, their neighbors, like neighbors of Dominic Labriata, are increasingly involved with people who planted evidence on all sides of my house, with Wethersfield police and with state police families. Whiting Forensics has a Joshua Julian, and has former mayors from Wethersfield and intercities involved with predicate acts with them, including with Saudis. You know, their stolen name there and our stolen name here, per another name involved. Also relative to why and to how everyone has self-valued roles. With even though there was a breaching method in the communications of our founders, they have that left out, and they have self-valued roles using what they said, leaving out what they declassified about that. If you're God, to leave out the breaching method with your reason, let alone with blame, convictions. In other words, not just about nuclear weapons anymore either, too. There are proofs that there is a name that forced, checked, hurt, and persuaded only allowed the syntax of any individual leader. Collusions hiding its name's roles with the coronavirus, because it needs to keep other things, others, ourselves blamed, and that's self-defended by others from itself, to hide behind and through that, which is relative to where and how a breaching method is. Nature itself shows this is one of the things true always that caused slavery and the crazy laws to be self-valued by people, even though we know when we are little kids. See, the kids are sensed the identities of the laws, kids, and foreign countries and their kids. They sense those titles being and having been worth what they are not. Where honest telling of any country's, modern country's history would have brought up criminal foreign influences, because there were hyper criminal foreign influences forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading that. It needs other things, others ourselves, besides this. Human factor, nature, breaching method. Again, that's true always, that nature shows us was the value of those laws. With the black, white pupils, whites of eyes, not allowed to communicate for nature's communications with it, which is hyper additional things. And everyone communicating for the breaching method or sensing that person not roles. Even today, you guys make black, white, and you screen out how our founders communicated for us to understand. There were international law names overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, at the same time, per way worse, at all locations /S. Our founders want us to pay attention here, black people. So in other words, the Meidastouch network and Michael Cohen. He also has rules with the sources of the news of their sources, like people with the name Kalal and Zeno, that repeated the word Jew to themselves. And quick instances around me of Paul Zeno, I had nothing to do with them. And then after my neighbor in my grade graduated, and in other words, the year after that, a Paul Zeno and a John Liano have roles planting evidence on my street, sequence shifts, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. They have roles with the and FBI with the and their sources with the highlight, and their roles with the networks with information regarding such. Interstates, they have people in Rhode Island, intelligence involved with people with the name Violet too, and Monarchia involved with differences, Racket, fake ties, fake nature ties to me by others, trying to make fights between us, and or pseudo, and or positive, and the difference of that. So we have interbranch forging and switching names involved here in Connecticut, in intercities and intra-cities, all sides of criminal and civil cases. Their sources also at the same time with the news and other, but and the time use /S of body dumping spots were brought up at the same time. When they were forcing roles with the principal child abuser, they hid what was actually recorded with that. Increasingly, whiting forensics has roles with those kinds of digital crime acts and methods and wire crime acts and methods that Wethersfield Police has roles with them. And that's also with their sources, which are also involved with state police families, interstates, identity theft, fraud, slanders. Increasingly, Middlesex Community College has roles with intelligence families, foreign and domestic, involved with the World Trade Center attack, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, names next to unions, where and how that's used in other words, used remotely. People pretending passions and emotions, using the examples of where unions are good or where they are bad to screen roles with all those differences with use /S of all locations /S. Black peoples. It is time. So we have to get through these talking heads, to use the phrase of a Tom O'Connor I never had a personal conversation with, involved increasingly with the FBI director Robert Luskin and his co-defendants have federal crimes at and between the campuses, intercities and intra-cities. Increasingly, people with the grammar school I went to. I mean, a 1 year school I went to a kindergarten on Valley Crest Street, or off of Valley Crest Street, on Wethersfield, Connecticut. People on that street increasingly have roles with predicate acts at every campus I went to with names, where they just take a picture where they're walking by and then put fake ties, fake nature ties as names on all sides of criminal and civil cases. And they all got brought up with the principal child offender. People even from other states were time walking, like a Tim O'Brien, when he was not living in Wethersfield, apparently. He was walking right at the corner of timing where I was going to be and walking right at the corner of Hangdog Lane and Highcrest Street. They have been planting identity theft, fraud, slanders with me with their roles with people from Russia, people from Korea, people with overt criminal enterprises, people from Russia, Ukraine, involved at Hartford Hospital with wire crimes with their doctors, with the Wethersfield Police too, and something to do with that corner. People with the name Peruta, with lawyers of the police chief, Cintron, and another one years ago, or more years ago, and with further, the FBI director Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, and their lawyer, Robert Chevrolet, and people next to his lawyer's office, like a John Mayall, also involved. That's not that far from the Harriet Beecher Stowe, Mark Twain houses in the state capitol. Increasingly involved with people criminally portable sequence ships. Their roles at spots next to the state capitol of Connecticut. Another thing is their roles with all kinds of sides of criminal and civil cases and news at the same time. So, in other words, interbranch force switch names on mass scale to hide line progressions and their roles of predicate acts with facts methods, high crimes. They already do and did things. And then where our styles of logic now, they put charges with no writing. And then they stack fake things in databases. All kinds of predicate acts with facts, wire, mail crime methods. They're hiding this from Judge Napolitano. All exceptions, exception nature, if they are there, they will come with demonstrations of the same thing. Judge Napolitano, if you could hear. Please get them on paper, one name and sequence. They have more people involved with violence on my street from other areas. I'm not being allowed to talk to this about this because there were a whole bunch of different countries involved and overt criminal enterprises and private ones. And they're acting professors. And the departments being and haven't been used remotely, grimly grouped in together. You see, there's Meidastouch and this Michael Cohen jumping in, pretending they're about free speech on January 6th treatments. They're covering up with sequence shifts and pretending not to realize. See, mandated law, you guys shouldn't change and fake what people say when they mention, get me off the fake conversations with Channel 3 News about the World Trade Center attack. Gail King has something to do with it, too. A whole bunch of people tied to Gail King and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and a whole bunch of people from New Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, and Connecticut's District Court. Also with names next to the judicial branch offices, like with Wethersfield Pizza House, has wire crimes and Wethersfield Police with them. Increasingly, people on my street have predicate acts with them. People tied to Stephen Sacco. In other words, he's faking ties to me in conversations with me as confirmations often as a stranger seeking me out to pretend other, because he's also making confirmations and demonstrations of his roles with the ones I'm involved with home break-ins in my area and the proven child abusers, leaders of kids years apart that they have roles with. They have roles with the intelligence community, criminally formidable, tactically delusions raw, next to education locations, next to the Wethersfield Department of Education for the state. Our roles with John DeMoro and a whole bunch of people tied to him with sexual and medical offenders of kids and all kinds of confessions relative and home break, people involved with the home break and untimely deaths like a Robert Rodriguez, who brought up the principal child abusers campus to me. Now, way worse than him with the upskirt natures was his recorded involved at the same time. There's a Brian Silver, his kids, and there's a Leahy family that have their kids further involved with sick digital pictures of the kids' uses and cover-ups with their fake motives with their own kids. They have and their federal evidences, crimes, and readings of statutes, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, including increasingly their collusions with co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, their family members and neighbors. It's important to get them on paper, one name and sequence, because I don't know all their names involved with the violence on my street, but I recognize them, some of them. In other words, and they have their doctors and the patients and the families of campuses all run in to other campuses and hide line progressions, like even medical and fire campuses. Fire campus, they all run in with their doctors and patients and fake sides of issues and fake whole transcripts, forging names. A whole bunch of people involved with forging names of other doctors at Harvard Hospital too. Intercities involved with Ukraine and Russia. And with the Wethersfield Police forging and switching names, fake conversations with me as a kid and now as an adult, and they won't get on paper since I was a kid. They have been screening their roles with a whole bunch of different countries and fake motivations. Increasingly, there are proofs that the family members of the branches are in the other branches too, and they're in other words, the same ones are pretending, oh, we need separation of powers. in other words, relative to their delusions regarding words like power, too. You don't bring up power and leave out how we have black people's rights of life. And fish have this. And we didn't invent it. They didn't invent it. You learn from power by it. In other words, per science though. You guys have religions interpreting criminally foreign influence tactically delusions raw too. Ugh.